to lesson 23. Today we're going to discuss controlling the flow with conditions and loops. Alright, so today we're going to cover how to test conditions with if statements. We're going to use the comparison operators, the logical operators, alternative conditions with else, how to create expressions with conditional operators, how to test for multiple conditions, how to repeat statements in a for loop. Then we'll look at while and do while loops, why you shouldn't create infinite loops, how to escape from loops and continue loops, and how to loop through an array's properties. So let's get started. All right, first of all, we're going to start with the if statement. So here's some examples of an if statement. I also have an example in here. I'm going to go ahead and go to the conditionals, and I'm also going to show you what these conditionals look like. So let me just bring this into view here. There you go. Okay, so this conditional page, which is the page I have displayed here, I have about 4 buttons, each to demonstrate a different part. And then I have a JavaScript conditional JS file here that executes these conditional statements. So I have a target here, a div. So anything I display is going to appear inside the div here. So let's look at the conditional. So let me go ahead and pop back over here. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and run my conditional statement. And here it says to enter password. Oh, yes. So what I should look at is over here just to see what the password is. So this is calling this. So it's going to use this, going to call this if statement. So I'm going to prompt enter the password, and then I'm going to compare to see if the password is going to be secret or not. Okay, and then it's going to print out an alert that the password is correct or was incorrect. So let's go ahead and finish this off. So I'm going to go ahead and type in secret here, click OK, and password's correct. I go ahead and do this again and just type whatever. Obviously it's the wrong password. Password's incorrect. So you can see how the conditional statement works. It's just an if statement here. So if this is true, this part of the if statement executes. If it's not true, the else part executes. All right, so that's the if statement. There's different conditional operators you can use. In our example, we use the is equal to operator, which is the 2 equal signs. But you can also use not equal, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. So there's a variety of different conditional operators that you can use in your if statements. You can combine conditional operators. The biggest way to there's 2 ways to combine it. You can use the double pipe, and this is an or operation. So if the phone is blank or the email is blank, then it'll print out the alert. If the phone is blank and the email is blank, it prints out this alert. I do have an example of that. So the next example that I have is this run logical, which runs that logic there. So what if I leave these blank and click OK, it'll say something is missing, and then both are missing. So in both cases, because I left, if we go down here, we're in the logical. So I prompted for the phone and email. This is the or, so either the phone or the email is missing, so something is missing. I left both of these blank, so this is phone is blank and email is blank, then both are missing. So that's why we got both of these going. Now, if I go back and run this again, and for the phone, let's say I put a valid phone number, but leave the email address blank, the OR is going to fire and say something is missing, but the AND will not fire. So that's why we didn't get the second alert. So that's this condition here. I want to just demonstrate that. We talked about the else a little bit in the first one. So in an if-else statement, if none of the ifs, you can have multiple ifs too. If none of the ifs, you have one if and then the rest are if-else. If none of the ifs in the if-else evaluate to true, then the else fires. So something to think of there. There's also a shorthand conditional expression. What it is this this if shorthand expression. This part evaluates, and I think, do I have a shorthand? Oh yes, I have an example of shorthand, so it's probably better to show you here. Here we're checking for the name of John. So either of these is going to be true. So here we're going to prompt to enter the name. If they enter John, is John evaluates to true. This is exactly the same as doing this. So they're both basically the same. The only difference is this is kind of like a shorthand to set the value of is John depending on this if statement you have here. So again, this is just a shorter way of typing this. It saves you from all of this typing. So again, if I go ahead and run this, let's go back to our, so if I say John, is John is equal to true, and then I give it a different name, is John is false. Okay, so that's our shorthand. Testing multiple conditions with if. I don't know if I have that. No, I think I go back to switch statement, so I'm good here. So here we have testing multiple conditions with the if statement. So you have if, else if. So you can chain as many else ifs that you want. And the first if is the one that evaluates. And then if none of these evaluate to true, the condition in the else will execute. So switch statements. So this is another one similar to the if-else, except you're using switch and case to work with multiple conditions. So let's look at an example here. So we have a different direction here. Oh, this is kind of nice. What this is going to do, this is going to change our window location. If you remember from the location chapter, what that's going to do is going to change the URL to go to a different page, depending on whether you type in next or previous. So let's go ahead and run this. So let's go here. All right, so click on the switch statement. Now it's going to ask for a direction. So I'm going to type in next, and that should take us, I think, to the loops page. So let's go click OK. Oh, it's an invalid direction. Oh, did I type that in wrong? Oh, next, it's all lowercase next. It's because I typed in mixed case. So do all lowercase next and click OK. And that moves us over to the loops. And then if I want to do previous, OK. That should move us back to the home page, which it did. All right. All right, so here we have some case components. Yeah, so the various parts of the case component is you have the switch, and the switch could either be a number or a string, as you can see here. And then the case statements try to match on the strings that you're looking for. So you put everything that you're trying to match on. The default is if it doesn't match on any of these, it's going to fall through and go to the default. Now, the one thing you have to be careful here with your case statements is you need to make sure you put a break at the end of each case statement, because if not, what's going to happen is everything will execute, go all the way through and start executing if you don't put the break so that it pops out of the switch statement. Okay, so those break statements are very important inside of your switch case statements. So just something to be aware of. All right, and then finally we're going to look at a bunch of for loops. So let's go ahead and work through these examples. So we'll go to the loop section. So you're going to go ahead and run a for loop. This is the first thing. So we'll go ahead and run a for loop. As you can see, it just printed all these lines 0 through 9. So how do we do that in our example here? So let's look at the loop. Well, first let's look at the HTML. Here again, we have all the buttons that you see on the page. You have the loops.js file, which we have here. So let's go to loops.js. Out there, loops. There we go. And then we have our target. This is where we print everything out on. So let's go ahead and look at all these ones. So the first one we're looking at is this for loop. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna go ahead and keep adding to the paragraphs, and then add it to the inner HTML, and that prints the H1, and it prints all the paragraph elements that appear there. So that's where you get this is line and then 1. And this is kind of a nice little thing that JavaScript gives you. If you have these backticks, you can actually, inside of a string, put your variable in here. It's called interpolation. And if you put a $sign and then 2 curly braces around the variable name that you want to print out inside of your string, this will print inside the string. So that's why, as this for loop goes through, it starts out at for loop as let I equal 0, so the first element is going to be 0, and every time through the loop it's going to increment by 1. This is what the I++ does. So every time through the loop it increments it by 1 until this is no longer true. So the first time through I is 0, I is less than 0 is less than 10, so this is true. So it keeps evaluating or going through the for loop until this is no longer true. And this becomes no longer true when I becomes 10. That's no longer true. It pops out of the loop, and then it just prints everything in the paragraph. So that's why you have, this is the H1 that printed out, and then these are all the little paragraphs that printed out. And notice 10 did not print out because it popped out of the loop at 10. So, all right, so that's how for loops work. While loops work almost the same. The only difference with while loops, again, let me go back here to our while loop. Now I can run the while loop here. Here we go. So now I run the while loop. Looks almost exactly the same, but just the loop looks a little different. Instead of having everything built out in the for loop like you have here, the pieces are kind of spread out all over. So the let I equal 0 comes before the while loop, and then the check comes inside. I less than 10 is here, and then the increment happens inside of the loop. So it's basically the same as the for loop, but the structure is a little bit different. Okay, but it basically prints, everything prints out the same there. Okay, so that takes us to the do while loop. The only difference with the while loop as a do while is where it does the check. Because the do while does the check at the bottom, the first, this loop is, the loop contents are always execute at least once. Okay, so let's go ahead and run our do while. I'll go back here. Let's see, here we go, do while loop. We'll run that. Again, looks exactly the same. So let's look at do while loop and see what happens. So the only difference, again, the setup is the same. Everything's the same except the check is done at the bottom. So, oh, and then the I++ is done before it over here. So there you go. So that's that. Let's go ahead and go back to our infinite loop. Oh, here you want to be careful. If you run this is, I don't think I ran this because I didn't do this because then it would just, the whole browser would blow up because it keep running infinitely. So, because there's nothing to stop this while loop. Because here we're incrementing n and we're checking I. Because I never changes, the while condition is always true and it just goes on forever. So you have to be very careful when you're writing loops not to end up in an infinite loop. There is a way to escape from a loop ahead of time, and that's to use a break statement. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the break statement. Here we say this line is 0. So what happened here in our break statement? In this case, we have our while loop, but what we do is we actually go ahead and after the first loop, while I is greater than 0, when I becomes 1, we break out a loop ahead of time. So it only prints one paragraph statement. And that's what you're seeing here. It's only printing the one paragraph statement. All right, and then a continue. Let's see. Yeah, so I do have an example of a continue statement. So here we continue to 5. So if we look over here, our continue statement. Oh, yeah. So what happens is we still go through the loops 10 times, but by having the continue here, what happens is anything after 5, we don't add the paragraph. So that's why here you're only seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 go through. 6 through 9 do not. And that's because of this continue here. When we hit this continue, it skips this line. And that's where I is greater than 5. So once I is hit 6, it starts skipping. All right, so that brings us to looping through object properties. I think we did the continue. We're looping through properties in an array. So the first thing we want to do is we want to look through these properties. So we print the street, city, state, and zip. So how do we do that? So let's look through these properties here. So here we go ahead and we create this address object, right, with the street, city, state, and zip. So sometimes when you have an object, you want to just iterate through all of its properties, and this is what we're doing here. So here what we're doing is we're doing the for in statement will loop through an object's properties, and then prop will hold the value of the particular property you're on. So the first property is going to be street. So here, when in the interpolation, it prints out street, and then the value at address street. So address street, the value is going to be 1 Main Street. So 1 Main Street prints here, street prints here. And then you have city, any city, state, any state, etc. Okay, and then that's how we came up with this printing. So this is the looping over properties using the for in. And then the next thing is looping over an array. Oops, let's do that. Looping over an array, which is the for of. So you use for of for array, for in for an object. So for the array, we have this names array with a bunch of different names in it. And so all we're doing here is we're looping through the array, getting the values of each name, and then just printing them out. And that's what you see here. We're printing all of these out. And that's, here's another example from our notes. Okay, so that pretty much concludes lesson 23. Hope you enjoyed the lesson, and until next time, we'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks. Bye.